Have you ever stopped to think that often, even though you want a healthy relationship with all your might, some of your attitudes may be pushing away that emotionally mature man you so desperately want by your side? It sounds contradictory, but that's exactly how it works. The responsibility doesn't always lie with him alone. You may also be sabotaging this precious connection without realizing it. What often presents itself as care, insecurity, or even love is actually toxic behavior that undermines emotional attraction and destroys healthy communication. If you feel that constant need for approval, suffer from excessive jealousy, or live in fear of abandonment, these are clear signs of emotional dependency and self-sabotage in relationships. But calm down. You're not alone in this. Many women go through this because they've failed to take a deeper look at female self-esteem and self-confidence, essential foundations for gaining respect and being a real priority. In this video, we'll break down 5 attitudes that, even unintentionally, end up pushing emotionally mature men away and jeopardizing any chance of a true and lasting emotional connection. If you want to understand how to identify these behaviors, and, above all, how to transform them in order to build healthy love relationships, stay with me until the end. Here begins your journey to stronger emotional intelligence and a much lighter, happier love life. There is something that an emotionally mature man notices from afar, and which immediately sets off an alarm bells. Emotional dependence disguised as love. When a woman places all her happiness, her security, and even her sense of personal worth in the relationship, she doesn't realize it, but she begins to suffocate this love dynamic. Gradually, she stops being that interesting, light-hearted woman who has a life of her own and becomes someone who lives for him, creating a silent but extremely uncomfortable pressure. And that doesn't mean that she doesn't love him, but there is a fine line between loving and losing yourself. Mature men pull away when they realize that they are becoming their partner's only source of validation. And do you know how this happens in practice? She stops investing in her own projects, abandons her hobbies, distances herself from her friends. Everything revolves around him. Her life comes down to waiting for a message, an invitation, a crumb of attention. And without realizing it, she gradually disconnects from herself. Do you know what the real problem is? That this emotional dependence often comes disguised as care, love, surrender. But deep down, it's an escape from looking at one's own life, one's own emotional need and emotional wounds that haven't been healed. And that's where the self-sabotage in relationships begins. She believes that being available all the time will strengthen the emotional connection, when, in fact, the effect is exactly the opposite. And it is precisely in this dynamic that another problem begins to emerge that drives away an emotionally mature man. One thing you need to know is that no emotionally mature man will stay where there is no emotional peace. And when a relationship begins to be marked by constant crises, arguments, jealousy, demands, and endless drama, he quickly realizes that it has no future. In fact, excessive emotional demands don't create emotional connection. They generate distance, wear and tear, and of course, personal devaluation. And do you know what the biggest trigger for this is? Insecurity, fear of abandonment, anxious attachment, and lack of affection. It's that feeling that if he's not showing you love all the time, something is wrong. And in this unconscious game, the woman begins to test, provoke, demand, interpret silences, create dialogues in her own head, always hoping that the other person will fill what is actually an internal void. And the more she does this, the more he pulls away. If she doesn't notice, this love dynamic turns into an emotional roller coaster. One day it's love, the next it's tension, then there's withdrawal, followed by desperation to reconnect. And this constant oscillation doesn't suit a man looking for a healthy relationship. He doesn't want to be responsible for her mood, let alone her self-esteem. Few things turn an emotionally mature man off more than realizing that a woman doesn't feel free to be who she really is. And, unfortunately, this happens a lot more than it seems. In an attempt to please, to be accepted, to avoid friction, she gradually begins to mold herself. She changes her tastes, opinions, hides her discomforts, and swallows what should be talked about. And without realizing it, she loses her very essence. It's that classic behavior where she starts saying yes when she wanted to say no. She laughs at things she doesn't find funny. She pretends everything is fine just so she doesn't seem difficult. And all of this stems, deep down, from the fear of being rejected, emotional dependence, insecurity, and the false idea that, in order to be loved, she needs to fit into the mold she thinks he expects. But the truth is harsh. A mature man doesn't fall in love with an edited version of anyone. He wants authenticity. If she doesn't notice, this lack of authenticity creates an invisible, silent, but real disconnect. Little by little, he begins to see that woman as someone with no identity of her own, no self-confidence, no positioning. And believe me, this totally breaks the emotional attraction. And when that happens, it's very easy for him to start distancing himself. You know those games like, I'll disappear so he'll miss me, I'll post a hint, I'll make him jealous so he'll react? That may work with immature men, but for an emotionally mature man, it simply sounds like emotional immaturity. He's not attracted to those who try to manipulate his emotions, but to those who know how to communicate in an honest, clear, and mature way. When a woman enters this cycle of childish strategies, such as taking too long to respond, pretending to be uninterested, testing, expecting him to guess how she feels, she activates a very dangerous perception in him that she is not ready for a healthy relationship. In practice, this only reinforces the estrangement, because for a man looking for a real connection, that's not attractive. It's tiresome, and the problem is that when he starts to pull away, she feels even more insecure, even more afraid of abandonment, and without realizing it, she intensifies these toxic behaviors even more, falling into a cycle of self-sabotage in relationships. And really, this love dynamic gets heavier and heavier, exhausting and full of emotional noise. And it's precisely at this point that another major villain of emotional connection emerges. There's a very delicate point, but it's extremely real. When emotional insecurity disguises itself as care, that thing of wanting to know where he is, who he's with, all the time, checking, asking, demanding, not because she wants to control him, in her mind, but because she feels that if she doesn't, she'll be forgotten, rejected, or even dumped. And this is where, without realizing it, she activates one of the biggest behaviors that drive away an emotionally mature man. The woman begins to live according to this fear of abandonment, this anxious attachment, this emotional neediness that takes over. And to try to feel safe, she puts herself in a position of disguised control. But for him, this doesn't sound like love, zeal, or care. It sounds like suffocation, a lack of self-confidence, and an extremely stressful love dynamic. And between you and me, no mature man wants to build something healthy in this environment. And the cruelest thing about it all is that the more she tries to hold on, the more he distances himself. Self-sabotage sets in. She diminishes herself, compares herself, questions herself, loses her own identity, lives in constant fear, anxiety, and personal devaluation. And what could be a light, enjoyable emotional connection turns into a relationship full of weight, guilt, tension, and demands. And if she doesn't realize it, this pattern repeats itself in every relationship. Now that you know these 5 attitudes that may be driving away an emotionally mature man, it's time to reflect. How have you been placing yourself within your relationships? Could it be that, without realizing it, you're not allowing insecurity, fear of rejection, or emotional dependence to take control? The first step to changing this dynamic is self-knowledge. Understanding your patterns and emotions in order to strengthen your female self-esteem and self-confidence. Remember, healthy love relationships are born when you value yourself and set clear boundaries without giving up who you are. How about starting to apply these changes today? Observe how you react to your fears and insecurities. Avoid excessive demands, and try to build true and transparent communication. This not only changes the way the other person sees you, but above all, how you see yourself. I ask you, are you ready to leave behind behaviors that only drain your energy and make room for connections based on respect, balance, and self-love? I want to know your opinion. What do you think you can change about the way you relate to attract a man who really deserves the best version of you? If you like these reflections, be sure to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to continue learning about how to build healthier and happier relationships. Let's go on this journey of self-worth and emotional growth together. Because you deserve much more than crumbs. You deserve to be a priority, truly loved and happy in love.